next guest is an NFL staff writer for The Athletic, providing in-depth video analysis for the Raiders, 49ers, and other NFL teams. His experience as a football coach and researcher provide him with a unique perspective when breaking down film of football team strategies, personnel, and draft prospects. You can always find him on Twitter and his fantastic work there at FB_film analysis. And he's got into the podcasting game. That's right. He started his own show, The Coffee House Stunt, and you can find that on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and anywhere you can find your podcasts at. So please welcome back to Raiders Fan Radio, Ted Nguyen. Welcome, Ted.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Glad to be back on.
Hey, glad to have you. It's been a little bit since we've had you. You're like you're now like the KG veteran reporter of Raiders Fan Radio. This is like your third or fourth time joining us, I believe.
Yeah, I'm a vet on this this show now, I think.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here today. You've always, Ted, been an awesome resource as far as like breaking down film and studying players and teams and their techniques. And we got to know you because you started off covering just the Raiders and really just doing it almost as a fan, weren't you?
Yeah, I did it just as a fan, had my own blog. Just a few of my friends encouraged me to do it just because they always ask me a bunch of football questions. So I did it for fun, and it kind of grew, and people wanted to read what I was writing, and eventually I was able to make it a full-time job, and I've been loving it ever since.
That's awesome, man. Well, you again, such an awesome resource for that. We got to know you and just familiar with your blog back then and how in-depth and that you got with it. And so, yeah, to see you now on the bigger stage doing it is just awesome. And congratulations to you on that. So you went last week, you were down for The Athletic covering the Senior Bowl. Tell me a little bit, just kind of your general takeaway of the event.
Yeah, it was my first Senior Bowl. I've always heard a lot of good things about it. Everybody is always like, oh, you got to go to Senior Bowl. And I didn't know what the big deal was just because, it was an all-star game. There's a lot of all-star games. But when you go down there, there's just so many NFL people there. There's all these people, all these great analysts that you meet on Twitter, and you talk to them for years. You never meet them, and you finally get a chance to have a drink with everybody and meet everybody face to face. And like I said, you get to network with a bunch of NFL coaches, scouts. You get to really see some high-profile prospects practice. So it was just a really cool experience overall, and I'm definitely coming back next year.
That's awesome. So again, you're an expert on studying film. You're studying players, breaking down mechanics, breaking down techniques, breaking down strategies by coaches. What did you see? Tell me a little bit about like maybe some of the wide receivers, and we'll get into a little bit some of the needs of the Raiders here in a minute. But I know you're kind of an expert on wide receivers and even quarterbacks as well. But what did you see wide receiver wise? Give me like a sleeper, somebody that stood out to you, maybe that you weren't anticipating having them get your attention going in.
I think the wide receiver group was actually the strongest group as far as just playing as a consistent positional group. I think they just dominated, and not a lot of people expected that. There weren't a lot of big names on a roster, on the wide receiver roster, but guys like Terry McLaurin from Ohio State, he really shined. He was kind of seen as a special teams guy coming in. He didn't have much production at Ohio State for whatever reason, but he came in and he just cooked everybody with his long speed. He looks like he's going to be a 4.3, 4.4 guy. He caught everything during the practices. I don't think he dropped one pass, and he was getting some bad balls thrown his way. The quarterback class at the Senior Bowl did not really perform too well. And I know he had a couple drops in the game, but in practices, he was just very impressive catching the ball, running routes, doing everything.
What did you think about the little guy from UMass? He ended up with a bunch of Raiders stickers on his helmet, like Terry McLaurin, the Ohio State guy you just mentioned. What do you think about him? He's like 5'8", like also real quick guy, slot receiver. Andy Isabella. What did you think about him?
So I got in a little bit. So UMass Twitter got on me a little bit because I brought up a couple of concerns with Andy Isabella and his practice performances. And I only brought these concerns up because Isabella is seen as there's a lot of hype coming in with Isabella. And originally everybody thought he was 5'10", measured in at 5'8", and I I've been guilty in the past of falling in love with little slot receivers just because I love what Wes Welker and Julian Edelman, those guys did for the Patriots offense, and Welker with Manning and the Broncos. And I've always been trying to look for this the next good slot receiver. I just think they boost and it could boost an offense so much. And I've seen a bunch of these receivers fail in the NFL that I thought were going to do well. And the big two things with those type of receivers, those smaller jitterbug receivers, is sometimes they take too long to run their routes. They add too much funk to their routes, and it's unrealistic in a real game. They might look great in one-on-ones when they're beating guys, but those kind of routes you can't run in games because they take too long for a quarterback to sit back there and stare you down and wait for you to run those routes. And the second thing is catch radius. Isabella's 5'8". And he was catching a lot of passes with his body, which means that he probably isn't going to extend for balls very much. So when you're a 5'8" and you don't have a lot of length and you're body catching, those are two areas of concern. And I'm not saying that Isabella is going to fail, and I don't like him as a prospect. I have to actually watch him a lot more. But I just brought those two things up as concerns because I saw those things in practice. So they remain concerns for me. Again, I'm going to go watch him more. But maybe I'm not as high as him as some other draft analysts out there.
You mentioned the quarterbacks. You mentioned how it was a little bit maybe unimpressive in some of the guys there. Were they overhyped? Were guys like Drew Lock and was it Jones out of Duke? Were they overhyped? And was that probably the most overhyped position out of all the ones that you saw down there?
Yeah, I guess it depends where the hype comes from. Because they have big names. Like everybody knows who Will Greer is. Everybody knows who Drew Lock is. But I think a lot of people came into this game thinking this is kind of an underwhelming class as far as their NFL prospects. Our Drew Lock might be the highest rated of all of them, and Daniel Jones. But you want to see consistent progress from those guys. And most of those guys were all in shotgun predominantly in college, and Gruden and Shanahan are more pro style. They run a lot under center. Most of their offense from under center, and these guys just didn't have enough time to really work on their footwork, and it showed up in practice. They're just wildly inconsistent with their accuracy or timing. So one, the talent wasn't great coming to the Senior Bowl, and two, some of those quarterbacks were just really uncomfortable under center. Will Greer was probably the biggest example of quarterback that just did not look comfortable learning these drops. So I was pretty underwhelmed by the quarterback performances at the Senior Bowl. I think most people would agree with that.
Are these are we talking like mid to late round guys ultimately? I mean, somebody maybe moves up to take a shot at somebody like Drew Lock, maybe even Jones, like you said, but other than that, are we just talking about, I mean, where does like a Trace McSorley go? Is that a 4th round pick as a project by the Raiders kind of a thing?
Well, I think Lock is going to go, Lock will probably end up in the 1st round. Just because his arm talent is maybe comparable to Josh Allen's arm talent. He's just, the ball just flies from his hand. But he has so many problems as far as a mechanical standpoint and being able to play under pressure. Same with Tyree Jackson. For me, Tyree Jackson would be a guy that goes late, but I could see a team falling in love with his talent and maybe taking a mid-round flyer on him. And honestly, I think what was the name you just mentioned in your question?
Trace McSorley from Penn State.
Yeah, I think Trace McSorley might be undraftable. I mean,
wow,
he misses so many passes, and he's already got the hype thing going against him. And at Penn State, when I watched him, he had a great career, but he had so much talent around him, and there were just so many opportunities that he missed. That I know he's a gamer. He competes hard. But I can't see him doing well in the NFL, and I hope he proves me wrong. But that's just what I've seen from him.
So aside from Gruden talked a lot about some of the maybe the intangibles that coaches can learn from coaching an event like this. So aside from those things that jump off the tape at you, what else can coaches What else can you take from this as far as, is this just getting to know these guys as players and as people and as off the field? And what is it when he mentions those intangibles, what kind of stuff is he talking about there?
Yeah, I think for quarterback evaluations, being in those meeting rooms is extremely important because you see exactly how intelligent these guys are, how well they're picking up the scheme, how well they're developing from a mental standpoint. And you don't get to see that just by looking at the film. That's another big part of the evaluation that a lot of us amateur analysts are missing, is seeing how these guys perform in the classroom. And that's so important for the quarterback position. So just being in there and, trying to install your offense and seeing how well guys retain from day to day to day, how their classroom mannerisms are extremely important in the evaluation for that position.
What'd you think of that film room they had down there in that ballroom where they had like 6 or 7 giant screens and the different scouts grouped up together in there? Did you get a chance to hang out in there and study any of the film?
I did a little bit, but I had to do so much writing, and I was expecting, because they promised us to send us the film because day 2 was going to be, they had their indoor facility and not all of us were allowed in there. So they emailed a bunch of us and said we're gonna get the film. So I was just expecting them to do it, and I didn't really check out the scout room too much. But I did get to check it out. That was pretty cool. Seeing all those different rooms, projector, and all that. I would love to have one of those in my house.
That's what I thought when I saw that. I'm like, I'll bet somebody like Ted just like freaks out in a place like this where it's just nonstop film. Like it's like Disney World or something. Where it's like you got screens all the way around you, and all the different teams. I saw John Dorsey bumping around in there, and I'm like, this is craziness. Like this was too cool. So set us up a little. Okay, so we talk a lot about quarterbacks, and some of the comments that came out from the Senior Bowl from Gruden about maybe the height thing. Maybe he'll reevaluate how he looks at quarterbacks and height because of the play of guys like Russell Wilson and Baker Mayfield and whatnot. Let me just ask you point blank, because you study a lot of film, and I know you've studied this guy a lot, and we debate as fans all the time whether he is or isn't. Well, what do you think? Is Derek Carr a good quarterback?
I think he is. I think he has. I think I was higher on him during the 2016 campaign, but I also knew he had room to grow, and unfortunately, he didn't take those steps to developing as a quarterback, and a lot of that had to do with bad coaching with Todd Downing. A lot of injuries and things that happened in 2017. I do think that he was being held back, or he was being a little cautious after his injury. But he did take some positive steps in last year, 2018. And it didn't show up in the numbers, but just because he had to play, he never had to face that much pressure in his career before. And I think he really developed playing under pressure, and he made a lot of good plays where he might not have made that in 2017. So I think that he does have potential to be that franchise quarterback, but just he hasn't played that way in the last couple of years because of a lot of factors. I think that the Raiders will give him next year to really prove that he's the franchise guy. Hopefully they get him better protection. He'll have a year under the system, and we saw that when he did have protection in Gruden's system, that there is a lot of potential for Carr and Gruden's partnership. So we'll find out in 2019. I think he's really going to get a fair shot next year.
What is it that you see on the film? Is it decision making? Is it mental stuff, or is it actual physical traits, like footwork and things like that jump out at you that kind of tells you that he's still improving?
His play under pressure mostly. There was times where he was just checking the ball down too quick, not being aggressive enough. But later, as the year progressed, he was holding onto the ball and breaking out the pocket when necessary. He cut down on his turnovers dramatically. He's thrown a lot of interceptions in the beginning of the year, and he cut that down. But he's just a very intelligent quarterback. That's one of his greatest traits. And he has an ability to make quick decisions. And if you mix that up with the ability to make plays when the play breaks down, then you have something. You have a franchise quarterback, and he started doing that towards the end of last year. And I hope to see that continue, and hope he starts off strong in 2019.
Awesome. All right. Well, we want to be sensitive to your time here, so I got just a couple more quick ones for you before we let you go. What does the team do well? We talk a lot about what the Raiders need, and they're glaring. There are lots of holes on this team, but aside from Derek Carr, what does the team do well right now? What are they set on?
I think the secondary played a lot better towards the end of the year. Gary Conley looks like a guy that could be a top corner in this league. And when he came while in the draft process, I compared him to Patrick Peterson, who's one of the top corners in the league. I don't think he's quite as athletic as Patrick Peterson, but his movement skills are comparable. And we saw some of that last year when he finally got consistent playing time. And I think when they settled on who's going to be the starters, they got Carl Joseph some PT. Reggie Nelson got out of the lineup. The secondary started playing a lot better, and they didn't really have a great pass rush to help them. So that's an encouraging thing to look for next year. I think they ran the ball pretty well at times. And again, if they could get some better protection from Carr, the offenses looked really good when they were able to protect the quarterback. So those are two things to look forward to in 2019.
So then with those kind of areas being set, so bust out your crystal ball. What do the Raiders do with as an overall draft strategy in this first round? Is it all defense, pass rush? And what do you think there?
I think they need a lot of help all around. So I definitely finding an edge rusher is going to be paramount, and I think that somebody good will fall to them. For Nick Bosa's probably gone, but they might have a chance at Allen. So yeah, they definitely need to find a good edge rusher. They need to find a weapon offensively, whether it's going to be one of the top wide receivers with one of those later first round draft picks. This is a very tight end rich draft class. Jared Cook he's not re-signed yet. I know the Gruden's expressed interest in re-signing him. So getting maybe one of those Iowa tight ends later in the draft, even if you re-sign Cook, being able to have two tight ends could make this offense a lot more dynamic. I think you need to find some right tackle competition. I know Brandon Parker did some good things last year, but he just did not play well enough for me to just comfortably go into the season with just him and Donald Penn. I want to see them add some competition at right tackle group. And yeah, I just think that, and linebacker obviously, but you're in a position where you could just really take the best player available, take that philosophy, and I think that this is a good draft for what a lot of the Raiders needs.
When you said tight ends, it made me think of another player down there. Did you get a chance to look at Foster Moreau out of LSU? Did you see him play at all? And what do you think about him as maybe a somewhere out of the first round that the Raiders take a shot on?
I did. I saw Moreau. He made a couple good plays, but I think he could definitely be a mid-round guy, but he just doesn't jump off the page as far as athleticism for me.
Okay.
One guy that I thought looked like, I know he's the most explosive tight end there. Doesn't mean that he's the best tight end at the Senior Bowl, but I thought Josh Oliver from San Jose State looks really explosive.
Hey, cool.
That's a guy that I want to study a little bit more, but he looks like he has some wheels. He has this comparable body to Jared Cook. I don't know if he's quite as fast. Cook ran a 4.5 as combine, but he looks like a really explosive player.
That's awesome. Hey, anytime we can pick up a Bay Area guy, man, I love that stuff, right? All right, so before I let you go, Ted, let's talk a little bit about what's next for you. We got this stadium thing that changes day to day. We know you're an East Bay guy. So what's on the horizon for you? Are you going to be able to, obviously, are you going to stay with the team regardless this year? And then what happens next year? And just kind of give us a little bit of what's going on with Ted. What over your next year or so?
Well, I started my own podcast. I told you a little bit about it before we started the Coffee House Stunt, and that's been pretty cool to just try something new. And I'm going to keep covering the Raiders and Niners next year for the Athletic Bay Area. I've been doing work on a national team and covering the league on a wider scope, but I always I always at least cover the Raiders and Niners once a week at the very least. And I'm a Raider fan at heart. They're going to Vegas. So I'll probably still be covering them from a film perspective. Maybe I won't be able to make it out to practices or make it out to games as much. But I mean, I just don't have much plans besides next year. So we'll see what happens when they go to Vegas.
Good deal. Well, I hope you're able to keep it up, man. We're a big fan of your work. You've always been incredibly gracious with your time with us here on this show, regardless of what your responsibilities have been in reporting. And so we're always very thankful to you for being willing to do that. And your work is great, man. And anybody that doesn't follow you on Twitter, definitely follow him. It's at FB_film analysis. Ted mentioned his new podcast. That is the Coffee House Stunt. And you can find that on Apple Podcasts. You can find that on Stitcher. Just look for it there and look forward to checking your new podcast. And yeah, thanks again, Ted. And I appreciate the breakdown of all the players and go Raiders.
Thank you. And one more thing, I apologize for not meeting up with you guys at Senior Bowl. I really tried to carve some time out, but it just got too crazy.
Uncle Mosh said, he's like, what's up with Ted? He stood us up. I don't know. I'll ask him about it. No worries. No worries. We figured you got busy, and it was crazy down there. It was, I was only able to spend one full day down there, and it was amazing. I mean, I'd never seen such a confluence of scouts and players and coaches. And I mean, it was just, it's bananas, and it's all pretty in a relatively confined area, which was surprising to me too. Yeah. Pretty cool stuff. So no worries at all.
Okay. Awesome. Hopefully next year I'll catch you guys.
All right. Sounds good. Look forward to it, Ted. We'll see you down there.
All right. Bye.
All right, buddy. Bye-bye.
All right, boys and girls, pay attention. You got your old Uncle Mosh here with an update. That's right. I got some stuff for you. Take out a piece of paper, a pencil, a pen. Heck, use your pocket knife and carve the info into your dashboard as you're driving down the highway. First off, you need to like us on our fan page on Facebook. That's right. Go to Facebook at Raiders Fan Radio Podcast. Don't forget about the Twitter. You know your old Uncle Mosh, he twits now. That's right. Go to at Raiders Fan Radio. Also, don't forget the Instagram at Raiders Fan Radio. Or what about our website? That's right, RaidersFanRadio.com. Heck, if you want to, you can even email us show@RaidersFanRadio.com or call us on the Raiders Fan Radio hotline, 909-345-3346. That's 909-345-3346. Don't forget Merv's Fan Cave on the YouTube, where you can get all the show links like the Fan Club Blitz with Splatterhead and Fitz. Find all our stuff on podcast providers like Stitcher, iTunes, and Google Play. All right, did I hit the time limit? Good.